Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty. Senator, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here. Do you believe that the president will forego this arms sale to Taipei after meeting with Xi Jinping? What's your assessment here?
The president clearly understands the strategic value of Taiwan, and I'm certain that the conversations with Xi Jinping certainly focused on the Strait, the aggressive behavior of China in the Strait. And I think that President Trump, again, I'm not going to get ahead of him in his negotiations, but has been very clear that Taiwan is a strategic asset that's critical not only to our economy, but to the world economy. And as the Taiwanese leader just mentioned, it would be devastating to our economy, perhaps, but to China's economy much more significantly were something to happen there in Taiwan. So I think everybody's handling this very carefully. The negotiations are proceeding. I was very pleased, actually, with the president's meeting in China with President Xi. We demonstrated massive strength in terms of our innovative capacity. If you think about the CEOs that traveled with the president there, were the best of American business. And if you look at the neighborhood, our allies like Japan, Australia, the Philippines, significantly stepping up their military strength and capabilities. So I think we've had a significant show of strength in the region. It's important.
All right. So you were pleased with the trip. You think it did, in fact, accomplish what the president needed to accomplish? No, because I know that Xi Jinping begins the meeting on Taiwan, and the president was interested in doing business deals. Do you think ultimately China will buy oil from the United States? I thought that would be a fantastic delivery if, in fact, that materializes.
I think that certainly is on the table, and it makes a great deal of sense. From a geopolitical standpoint, I'd like to see that happen. From an economic standpoint, it would do a great deal to adjust the trade imbalance that we've long had and long endured with China. And also, if you think about the economic outcomes, 200 Boeing jets that China's agreed to purchase, 17 billion of goods on an annual basis. So I think what President Trump is doing is normalizing the trade relations with China where he can. And if you think about it, roughly 90% of the goods that we trade back and forth with China are not dual-use goods. But I think the president's going to be very clear and very clear-eyed about dual-use product and making certain that America maintains its competitive advantage when it comes to these key technologies, whether that be in AI or any type of technology that could be deployed on a dual basis to military uses.
And of course, Xi Jinping needs that strait opened again because he was buying 90% of Iran's oil. The president is expected to hold a Situation Room meeting today to discuss military action potentially against Iran after delaying a planned attack on the regime that was supposed to happen today. He says Gulf allies have asked him to see through a deal with Tehran. The president posted on Truth Social this deal will include, importantly, no nuclear weapons for Iran, and he told Secretary Hegseth that the U.S. military, quote, be prepared to go forward with a large-scale assault on Iran on a moment's notice if in the event that a deal is not acceptable. Senator, where are we in this war? What would you say in terms of your foreign policy role here?
I think we're at a point where the Iranians have to absolutely agree to something that's going to work for us or suffer the consequences. President Trump is making that very clear. He's been incredibly patient, listening to allies in the Middle East region. I'm certain that they want to see a deal done because it's been so devastating to all of them. But President Trump's patience, I'm certain, must be wearing thin at this point. We certainly have the military capacity to deliver exactly what President Trump is suggesting. And if you think about where Brad Cooper, our head of CENTCOM, landed on all of this, he's still got a significant target package left to go. It'll take a couple of weeks to execute that. But at that point in time, it'll be an entirely different show. I think the Iranian regime needs to wake up, understand that, and make a clear decision. They will not have nuclear weapons, nor will they have that capacity. They're going to have to stop the terror in the region and stop their hostile behavior. So it's pretty clear to me that the decision time has come. Let's hope they make the right one.
Senator, let me move on to domestic issues. And, of course, you have been going after these proxy advisors. You say that they're foreign-owned and Soros-affiliated. What specifically are you doing in that regard?
The proxy advisors, I think, have just emerged yet again. These are a duopoly, ISS and Glass Lewis, a duopoly of companies that advise passive investors, think about big mutual funds on Wall Street, how to vote the shares of stock that they represent in America's companies. And what they're doing, these companies, we found these proxy advisors engaging in political activity. Now what they're trying to do is prevent companies that are headquartered in New York from moving to more friendly jurisdictions. If you think about what's been happening in New York State, the judges, the judiciary that are willing to back some very far-out plans. Think about what they did to Tesla in Delaware with respect to the compensation package that shareholders voted for twice. The Delaware judge just overturned it because he didn't like Elon Musk, didn't like what the outcome was. I don't know the rationale. Certainly wasn't a legal rationale. And what they're trying to do is prohibit the free movement of American corporations in America. It's absolutely unconscionable. It's time for these proxy advisors. It's a racket, and it's a duopoly. They're misusing their monopoly status. It's time for it to come to an end, and I intend to pursue it legislatively with any Republican and Democrat that are willing to work with me to deal with these.
Paul Atkins joined me recently to talk all about that as well, and he wants real change there as well. One of the issues that I found was that when you're talking about financial services companies, oftentimes those groups, whether it's ISS or Glass Lewis or even, by the way, BlackRock in some regard, you know, they are telling shareholders how to vote, but they're actually competing with that financial services company. So, I mean, there's a conflict of interest inherent just by advising a financial services company shareholders to vote in a certain way when you're actually competing with that company.
It's amazing. I'll tell you another aspect of the racket. I was serving on the board of directors of a New York Stock Exchange traded company before I came into public office. And we got to recommend against one of the positions on our proxy statement. That's what these firms do. They recommend for or against. And then we get a call the next week to the CEO's office saying, well, we have a consulting arm that can help you get right with us. And you expend, depends on the company, depends on the problem. You can spend, a lot of money. On the consulting side, it is a complete racket. Again, they shouldn't be involved in politics. They need to be held to account. They're murky is a kind word to say, and I've talked with Paul Atkins as well. We need to step up and expose this, get clarity and transparency in terms of what they're doing, and get them out of politics.
All right, real quick on the other domestic issues, the GOP leaders in the House and Senate are moving on a reworked reconciliation package around immigration. The Senate budget panel expected to meet tomorrow ahead of the voting session Thursday. Where is this going after the Senate parliamentarian struck down the $1 billion in funding for the president's ballroom, which was tucked into the reconciliation bill?
Oh, the process on the ballroom, just to take care of that for a moment, that's a negotiation that's ongoing with a parliamentarian. I think Senate leadership right now are reconsidering how they're going to present that, but that discussion is not over.
Here we go. Once again, Tom Tillis going against the president says he's not going to vote for any reconciliation plan that includes the ballroom. Does he not understand that the president's not even going to get the usage out of this ballroom? Probably it's probably for future presidents because it's important to host foreign leaders.
What you just stated makes complete sense to me. I can't articulate why one of my colleagues would withhold a vote for this. It makes complete sense to me. At the same time, that's only one vote. We just need to get past the 50-vote threshold here in the reconciliation package. So Tom Tillis cannot hold this up, nor can any one of us. But I think the important thing here is that we need to fund ICE. We need to fund the Department of Homeland Security fully. And this $72 billion package is going to actually do what the Democrats have refused to do in the face of massive increase in death threats against ICE officers, in assaults against ICE officers. The Democrats have been willing to stand back and let this happen and defund the police here in America. That's not going to stand. Republicans will not allow it. The president's not going to allow it. We will get this done in a matter of days.
I'm just moving quickly because we only have a couple of seconds left, and I just wanted to get your take on a couple more things. It's too bad, by the way, you have to use reconciliation for regular appropriations. I mean, that's just ridiculous, and that's what you're being forced to do. Real quick on the Clarity Act, you worked so hard on the Genius Act, and we've been waiting to see how the Clarity Act plays out. And on Kevin Warsh, the new debate is he going to raise interest rates given the spike in yields? Your take? He's going to be sworn in on Friday, Senator?
Well, on Kevin Warsh, I think what we're talking about here is a situation where they're looking at inflation. In this case, truly transitory. You go back to Biden. Biden wages war on the domestic fossil fuel industry. That's inflationary. Pumping trillions of dollars into the economy in a stimulus package that was truly inflationary on a long-term basis. Here we're talking about a market that's dealing with a specific event. There's significant backwardation in the market right now, which means that the market is expecting prices on West Texas crude to be significantly lower 6 to 9 months from now. That certainly feels transitory to me. I think that we'll be capable of looking past that. I look forward to getting Kevin into position. He certainly has the capacity and the maturity to look at this wholeheartedly and I think get to the right answer for America.
The issue on payments, rewards from crypto, has that been settled in Clarity?
So far, it's been settled. We got it out of committee. Now we're going to go to the floor of the Senate, and we'll see if that's the end of the debate.
Senator, it's great to have you. A wealth of knowledge, as always. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Maria.
All right,
Thanks
Senator
very
Bill
much.
Hagerty. Quick break and stay with us in the next hour. Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree Eric Herrera is here. He's on the Forbes list 30 Under 30. He's going to join us for the rest of the show. You don't want to miss it. Back in a minute.